Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. Today, we're going to jump in to the idea of intuition. Now, something to keep in mind is this conversation is going to go a few different directions, okay? There isn't really a linear track about intuition. So I'm going to throw a few little elements in there, and hopefully those will kind of awaken some, brain cells in you about ideas that you maybe once had or situations that you've had. And this isn't obviously all encompassing, otherwise it'd be forever long, right? So I'm going to try to just touch on a few things. But the idea is to touch upon a little bit about intuition. You might be asking yourself, why is it important? What's so important about intuition? Well, when you're trying to problem solve or innovate, create, and all those sorts of things, what I often find is that folks hone in on a physical question, right? We have a question we're trying to answer. Why is it that this occurs? Now, the real simple form of problem solving, when we're dealing with lean processes and all those sorts of things, is the 5 whys, right? Well, why did this happen? And then because of this, and then why did this happen? And because of that. And then you do that about 5 times, and typically you'll get pretty close to the core root cause of why something occurred, right? And then you can do some fishbone, do your fishbone Ishikawa diagram, right? Fishbone analysis, right? Kind of a cause, contributing cause and effect, and so forth, right? So you can follow, use that mechanism as another way to answer and arrive at answering a question, right? Or find out what the contributing factors are to an effect or an outcome, right? Sorry about that. That was a little contorted, but but there are methodologies, right, to answer questions. And those are fantastic. And that's great when we're doing Kaizen events or improvement events. We use those methodologies as a simple way to kind of get the team on track to, hone in and on the question and then begin to figure out answers, right? To overcome maybe multiple questions and overcome a lot of constraints and barriers to success, right? So, but today I'm going to go a little bit woo-woo on you, okay? And talk a little bit about intuition, because we can ask those questions, and having those questions are the first step. But our intuition, what drives some of the questions, right? So I've dealt a lot, about talking about us as human beings and what our drivers are. We've talked about codependence and enabling and all the things, right? Narcissism, sociopathy. We've talked about a lot of these things, right? And how they're not helpful and inhibit our abilities a lot of times, some of these things, right? But it always drives back to the core root, the root of most drama, toxicity, and things that are, barriers to us, dealing with each other as human beings. Is the barrier is essentially fear of not having control, fear that somebody's going to make us look bad, or that we're going to look bad, or that we're X, or that somebody will think Y, or somebody will do something. It's always a fear, right? And from those fear, people that's where you get hoarding. Hoarding comes from that. Why are people so aggressive? They're so aggressive because, it's the bully effect. They're so aggressive because they don't want somebody to aggress on them because at some point somebody did, right? So essentially bullies are trained to be bullies by other bullies, right? It's a handed down process, sometimes through families, sometimes through the environment. It just depends. And that same mechanism works when you're talking about people who are more on the healing service side of life, right? People who gravitated to, say, be police officers and have generation of police officers, or military, right? Or medical, or those sorts of things where there's a healing or service orientation to their environment and to how they were, conditioned in life, right? Developed in life. And then they took what they learned and saw the value in it, and they took it further. So might have been a bunch of nurses in their family, and then all of a sudden one decides, I'm going to become a doctor. And then maybe that somebody down the line, oh, I want to become a physicist or a this or a different version of that or da 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 da. But it's always in search of that service or that healing. It's a healing modality is what it is. And if you think about it, just as I put in the book, our purpose in general for all of us, we're here to protect love. Think about it. Everything you do is driven toward, everything you do is driven toward protecting love, right? Doing this video for me, what is it doing? It's protecting love. We're passing on information, even though there may be nuggets of what I'm talking about that actually strike you as like, I hadn't thought of that. Those little dominoes, just like the dominoes that you have in your interactions throughout the day, those little dominoes have impact, right? But we're here to protect love, not only for in our own lives, but in the lives of others, right? And we do things to what? In organizations or even in just general life, we do things to serve customers. Who are your customers? Everyone, right? Even yourself. You are your own customer as well. So you are, and you can fight it all you want. You can try to fight it all you want, but you go to work to serve a customer. And if you don't see that service to your team serves the customer, then you kind of you're missing a lot of opportunities to build relationships and all of that. But within that service to customers, we have what? We're protecting love. All right. So this is universal, folks. If you want to know and be on track with purpose, that is like a core element. The core thing is to protect love. From that, the tributaries that branch off are your gifts and your talents and your skills and abilities, right? So whatever you do, if you're a clown in a circus and you entertain people, you make people laugh and have a good time, well, guess what? That's your healing modality. Your skills and all the rest of that are what you do to put into that creates that outcome, right? That's protecting love, right? And that, obviously some people are all trippy about clowns, but whatever. It doesn't matter what you do. The core essence of what we're saying here is that you're here to protect love. You apply everything you do is going towards something that is driving that protection, right? For you, your family, your friends, your community, all of humanity, all of the things, right? And it's important. All right, so we got that down. Now, intuition, why I was said earlier about the woo-woo thing is that intuition isn't something you can really, it's like water, I'm going to grab some water, right? You can hold water, right? But you can't really grab onto some water. You can try, but it doesn't work too well, right? There's a resistance. It's there, but it's also difficult to get a handle on. Intuition's kind of similar to that. So you might have questions that you're trying to answer. And your intuition is really, you're an antenna. Think of it this way. Pardon me. Think of yourself this way. You're an antenna. Because you are. And if you ever, turned on a radio that had an antenna on it, you grab onto the antenna and all of a sudden your reception gets better. It's because we're a magnet, essentially, electromagnetic, biological, magnet, essentially. And so we can send and receive signal, okay? We know this because if you grab onto that antenna, your reception gets better, okay? So with that in mind, think of yourself as a receiver, okay? And as a receiver, you can what? Pick up on signal, okay? And what do you think intuition is? You're picking up on signals. Well, you might be asking yourself, well, what signals? Well, it might be answers to the questions you've been asking, right? Think about a question you've been asking. I'll use an example. I wasn't sure, or I shouldn't say I wasn't sure. I was curious, right? And a question that I had was, do we, and this is back in 20, I think it was 2020, do we absorb energy from the sun, right? We know we convert energy from our food and all of that, vitamins, minerals, all these things, right? To, for our building blocks and for energy and all that. That part was pretty straightforward. But I thought, you feel better when you're in the sun. Do we get energy from the sun? That was my question. And so I started to look some things up. And then that's when I learned about ATP and ADP. And just to keep it simple, is just think of the D and ADP as depleted, okay? And I think the T is topped off. The energy in your cells, when they're topped off, that's ATP. When they're depleted, ADP, okay? So what I realized, or what I discovered by asking my question, I thought, okay, I'm going to look some things up. So I looked some things up online. Okay, fine. And what I found out was about ATP and ADP, that we build up energy and then we expend it out, right? We build it up during the day, and it's kind of see if I can do this. This isn't perfect, but there's cycles to the buildup, and then it builds up. But then it discharges later in the evening, which that made me think of something else. This discharge made me think of something else. I thought, well, that's interesting. That looks familiar. That reminds me of, and I don't know why it stuck in my head, but how much the crime is in the evening times. And I thought, I wonder if that's just random. So I looked that up, right? It's like one question led to another and so on, right? And what I found was, and it wasn't perfectly aligned, but it was doggone similar, is that our crime rates and the times of day almost aligned. It was almost a mirror image of our ADP, or the buildup of energy. Okay, obviously ADP is when it's depleted, but the ATP, it was a buildup until it was finally depleted. But the time that it was depleted the most is during these cycles of these peaks aligned with the crime rates, which made me go, well, that's pretty weird. And then I remembered the whole the whole notion of, you've heard lunatic. Well, lunatic, and the whole notion that and it was kind of, I don't know, it was more woo-woo lower than anything. And I remember hearing something about, they talked about so much more crime, for example, happening during full moons. So I looked that up. And in the process of looking that up, which that was kind of like, whatever, informational, but there was some information there, but not super deep, but there was some info. But what did come out of that, and it's the reason I have a circle here. Let me erase this and clean up my act here. Is that the Earth, this was us. We're building up ATP, right? And then until we hit, discharges, and now we're depleted. And then our new day starts over, and we do this, and this is our daily cycles, right? Well, then I stumble across the notion, or not the notion, but the fact that the atmosphere builds up ionization, okay, throughout the day, and then depletes. And that the Earth has this buildup and depletion just like we have. Oh my gosh. That's wild, right? That's kind of wild. And so what I started to figure out, and I'm looking up more information in and around this, and I'm going, oh, this is interesting. We have this buildup on the earth, we have this buildup within us, and then this depletion. And so I thought, well, that's pretty amazing. And what is that telling me? Well, there's some connectivity to these things, but the main thing is that when you have a question, the answers come. Now, yeah, I looked up a couple things and things came to me, but what did it start with? It started with a question, right? Started with a question, and the question wasn't answered in that moment, but this information became something that is useful in other avenues. And I'll come back to the question about the sun. Do we get energy from the sun? The earth gets energy. This ionization comes from partly from the sun. Okay, so where is this coming from? Well, because I was curious, are we getting energy from the sun? I don't mean, that the effects aren't helping driving processes of, the whole vitamin D, da, da, da. Yes. I'm talking about, do we actually get energy? Are we gaining energy from the sun? So what was amazing is a few months later, not even looking for it, just kind of randomly, something had popped up, I don't know, in one of my feeds or something. I can't remember, but it's been a while. But there was a NASA study, and it was almost like somebody knew the question I was asking, because NASA did a study and it found out that the mitochondria actually was striving to try to get to sunlight, and they discovered that we do strive to have sunlight because we do get energy from the sun, right? We're probably not getting as much, it's not like we're eating, as much energy that we say could eat food, that would take the place, but there is a buildup. This is as similar as it was with the earth. Now, what can we extrapolate, in a very loose sense? Folks, the earth is alive, okay? The earth is alive. Not just because of the ATP and the ionization of the atmosphere and then the depletion of it. That's just evidence, right? Wow, there's evidence that shows a mirroring effect between us and the earth. The earth is alive, right? Which is pretty amazing when you think about it. And then you get to thinking about lava and water and all the elements, and then you get to thinking about the human body, and you go, oh, there is a lot of similarities, right? So you think about it, think about all the bacteria and all the, everything that's in your gut. They say there's like billions of bacteria, millions and billions, whatever, bacteria, all these living things in us that are digesting our food and running our processes and doing all this stuff. We think we're just us, but we're us made up of a whole bunch of living organisms, right? Sound familiar? Just like the planet, right? Now, if those organisms are getting the right food and our food is balanced and we're doing all the good things, there's a synergy there and things are good. Same way, right? We're taking care of what we got going on here, things are good, right? It doesn't mean that that we're not dependent on the earth, and the earth isn't dependent on us. The earth is. And so if we aren't, it's like think of an upset stomach. If you think of an upset stomach, all that stuff is at conflict, right? All those organisms are now at conflict. There's chaos and mayhem going on there, right? And we get sick. Well, same way. If we're not aligned and if our energy isn't right, and if we're not on, if we're not, you could say our collective consciousness isn't in alignment and we're not doing good things and staying in the positive, right, in the loving way, protecting love, then the earth's probably getting sick too, right? So, yeah, just a little sidebar information, on our way to talking about intuition. So think about this buildup in the discharge. That's what I want you to kind of remember for the moment. So there's a buildup and discharge within us. There's a buildup and a discharge on the planet. So what is my theory? Theory, very loosely, my theory is that, and I'm coming to this because of answering a question, right? Intuition. We do Kaizen events. We get together in a room. A few of us, it could be a room or a space, a conference room, whatever it is to begin with. And then we go out and do things too, but collect data and information. But essentially, we're trying to what? Answer a question. And when we get together and we focus on the question as a group, then we're able to find the answer much more quickly. We have breakthroughs. We have other insights that come from trying to answer this question. We find other answers to questions like we were just going over, right? I'm giving you kind of a walkthrough example of, trying to ask a question to figure out an answer to it, right? So your intuition, what? It's basically feedback. Just like when you get into a group to solve a problem, right? Just like people go to church and they're all together, focused on the same prayer or the same question or the same, interaction, the same message, right? People get together, it creates what? A magnetic field, right? We have all that energy. And that energy builds up, and we are an antenna, right? So what's my theory here relative to intuition? When you ask a question, or you have a question, right? You have to have a question. And sometimes the question will find you. Okay, so that's probably a whole nother video. but you have a question. My theory is that this field that surrounds our planet, okay, I'm just going to do this. Just to kind of, it doesn't look like we got a big loose donut going on. But that this field, when you ask a question, all the answers are in this field, okay? And it's basically a web, okay? I'm not going to draw a web, but just imagine a web around this whole thing. And you ask a question, and within a certain time frame, and this is where I believe Tesla was kind of going as well. I mean, there's more to this than simple what I'm going to tell you, but you ask a question, and you're going to, in a 3, 6, or 9, right? It could be 3 days, 6 days, 9 days. These could be weeks. These could be months. Could be years. But in a 3, 6, 9 sequence, and I believe it has to do with the math of essentially the Earth, right? But the math of it all underlying is really the 3, 6, 9 stuff. But in the very general terms, you ask a question, those answers are already out there. Everything possibly that could ever be asked or supposed or ideated, whatever, all of those questions have already been asked, and the answers are already out there. The answers, folks, this is the breakthrough of the video. I'm just going to title it Intuition because I'm just having fun talking to you about this. But the answers, that old chicken and the egg thing? The answers, this is going to trip your brain out, came before the question. Okay. The answers existed before the question. Because if you're asking the question and then the answer comes to you, how do we know this? Because even Einstein and Tesla both would do thought experiments, basically. Let's just call it what it is. They're old guys, not at every stage of life, right? They were guys, whatever. And they took some naps. and they had questions on their mind. And maybe some of it was a little bit of meditation or whatever, or just some light thinking or focusing on a problem. But for the most part, they just relaxed, thought about these things, and things come to them, right? And in that questions that they had, even Einstein with his theories of relativity and all those things, that it was a light bulb moment. It was a light bulb. It wasn't like they put together this, like a little kid builds a Lego bridge or a plane or whatever they're building, right? That is a created thing. That's amazing too, right? That's a vision. That's the visionary vision aspect of the same thing. You have a vision, and the vision, you have an idea, and then from that idea, a vision builds upon it, right? That's that creation way that we have. But they have the question. And those light bulb moment, when it came back, it's my guess that they were probably getting the answers. They were probably doing this often enough to sharpen their intuitive skills that in probably 3 hours, right? Probably within 3 hours, they were at least getting a nugget of answer of a light bulb, partial light bulb or a full light bulb situation. Pieces of the puzzle or the whole picture, right? Because what? The answers have always been out there before we even thought to ask the question, okay? And your intuition, while it can be foggy, your intuition knows this. Your intuition knows that the answers are out there, okay? And really, the only thing that we're afraid of with our intuition is that it's wrong. Why is that? Well, I could be, let's say it's somebody's behavior, and you're thinking, well, this person's probably doing nefarious things, okay? Or nefarious things, or not as nefarious, but, not good, or okay, or pretty good, or really good, or, they're super fantastic, whatever. There's a range, right? That's because your intuition is picking up on what? Your intuition initially, anyway. I think my theory is that, yes, you will get answers, but the first thing may not be the correct thing, right? So you always have to pose these things as kind of in a sandbox, right? I'm going to put that in a sandbox, right? That's an idea to play with over here. It's not something I'm going to stand on a podium and say, oh, this is what it is, whatever. I'm having fun with this conversation, and hopefully you're enjoying it too. The answers are out there. The difficulty with intuition is all the possibilities. So when I say all the answers are out there, and this is where it gets a little woo-woo again, is remember, there's a lot packed into these answers. What are these answers? They're what? They're essentially timelines, right? They're choices. These are choices. Sorry, not the neatest there. They're choices. These are all the possibilities. These are the possible. They may be the answer, right? This is why we have to test these intuitions when they come to us. We have to kind of go back and go, okay, is this legit or is this not, right? We have to test it out and see if this is what it truly is, because our intuition, and I'm using other people because other people are also making choices. So there's a lot of moving parts here, right? If I was just answering a question about a piece of machinery or a process, so much easier, right, to figure out. But when we're talking about intuition, it's really the same idea. This is all the same kind of overarching idea, but I'm using a person or people as an example to show that you're picking up on all the potential possibilities. So if we make assumptions off our intuition, right, we have to qualify it. That's why I'm qualifying this as a theory. Okay, this is my theory. Okay, this theory has facts in it. Okay, but it's my theory. And that if you have a question, and so you can play with this to get in on the test, right? For you to get on the intuition test, if you want to validate it or poo-poo it or whatever you want to do, think of a question, okay, and mark the time, and then think of a legit question. It's like, how do I do this? And then don't dwell on it too much. Just have it, and then go on with your day. Or if you happen to be fortunate enough to have like nothing going on, meditate on it for a long time. Try, what Einstein and Tesla did. Try doing that for 3 hours, but, in a very light way. I'm just like, don't do anything, but just kind of stay in that question, right? Do your little day, but kind of keep that in the middle of your mind. Not, don't starve to death, okay? And see what you get, right? Because every time I've done Kaizen events with people, right, we've always found breakthrough. And so many times, the breakthroughs were exponentially greater than the original goal. So if our goal was to be like, okay, we're going to try to, improve productivity 20%, whatever, right? Whatever the goal was, because they're all different, the different goals. But it always was much greater result than we originally set out. And I think part of the reason is when you ask the question, as we talked about earlier, you're going to find other nuggets, other answers that answer other questions that are associated to your bigger question. So it's almost like the field knows you need those other pieces, that those other pieces are part of a broader answers to a broader question that maybe you haven't asked. So you may be getting questions or answers to questions you haven't necessarily asked. So if you're walking down the road and you have an intuition about something, you are getting the answer or the possibility downloaded into you, right? Another theory, this is why I think anxiety also occurs, because we're getting an overwhelm of potential, and it isn't always good. Okay, it may be it may be playing on a previous fear too. So if you have a fear, what do you think the question is going to be? Fear-based. Well, yeah, it's going to confirm those sides. Why is that? Because you're kind of, in a really interesting way, we're creating our reality, right? So if you have a fear, if you're fearful of a thing, then it's going to reverberate those answers, and those, your intuition is going to get fed with validation of those fears, and then it's going to amplify that fear. And I feel like that's what an anxiety is. I'm sure, there's more physiologically going on there, but so change your frame of reference, right? Change your frame of reference and allow your intuition to now be a healing modality by what? Focusing on, okay, well, we're going to have great outcomes. What do we need to do to have great outcomes here? And then when you focus on that, what's the great outcome? Then, then the response or the field is going to provide you answers or roads to great outcomes, to good outcomes, right? To positive outcomes. It really is. It isn't false positivity. Positivity is just a feeling, right? Although I'm not poo-pooing a feeling either, but it's not about just being positive or just being negative. It's about having a productively positive question or thought, or how can I find my way through this jungle? I don't know where I'm at. How can I find my way? And when you focused on a positive outcome, then the field responds with, some answers, clues, insights, and so on. If it's, oh my gosh, I'm lost, I'm never getting out of here, then, and you just stay in that, well, it's going to feed you back that same thing, which is going to amplify your fear, it's going to amplify your anxiety, it's going to amplify a whole lot of things. And Now think about interpersonal conflicts, right? We're talking about what's going on with us as a human, or a few of us as humans together working on problems or answering questions, and we're getting feedback, right? But now think about us interacting with one another. If we want the relationships within our organizations and any of our teams or our families or friends and all that stuff, if we want that to be positive, then we have to do what? Leave an open door to a positive outcome, even if it's to do nothing, right? Even if it's not to ask the negative question, it isn't to say to be negative, or to have negative thoughts or whatever, but understand the reality of the situation. Understand the reality is neither, right? Positive or negative. It's just establishing what the reality is. Your intuition may tell you, oh, some people are struggling with some things. Oh, some people are fearful about they're doing certain things because they're fearful, right? Our logic, our intellect can follow this as well. So this isn't a intellect only, or a whatever, soul or spirit only, or a physics only, or a XYZ only. It's all. Everything is one, folks. Quit trying to pull it apart, right? You can't, if I rip my steering wheel out of the car and I'm walking with my steering wheel, am I driving the car? No. I'm going, see, the steering wheel is the most important thing. And then somebody rips the wheels off and they're rolling the wheels down the road. See, this is the most important thing. No, folks, it's the entire thing put together. That's the important thing. It is all of us. It is us as individuals, all these things within us. This is all us. And then all of us is all of this too, right? It's all one. It's all one thing. We're dealing with one thing. The answers, right? The answers came before the question. You can't out-question the answers. Okay? You can ask questions all day long. You can surmise and create to infinity, right? There is no limit except the limit you put on yourself. So, I know, intuition, packed a lot into intuition. You might think, well, what is that intuition? Well, intuition is a feeling, right? You may think of it this way. And I talked about love in the beginning. Think about your first real love when you were young, right? And think about your first real love, right? And that feeling that you had of being in love and just, oh my gosh, everything is just great. And it's just that pure love, right? And think of that and hold that in your mind's eye, right? Now that, for some of us, maybe many, many decades ago, whatever, right? A long time ago, we'll just say. But you can feel that feeling, right? And because of that, you just time traveled, folks. You just went back in time. Well, no, that was a memory. Was it a memory or was it a feeling? Was it a memory about a feeling? Because if you focus on it, what are you going to feel? You're going to feel that feeling again, right? Well, where do you think that those feelings and all these things are stored? You think they're stored just inside of you? Yeah, there's part of that, right? There's that. There's some of that. The memory, right? You have to have the memory. The memory sparks what? Sparks the intuition. The intuition goes, oh my gosh, I would say the intuition, the memory sparks the information, the answer to the question, right? And those feelings, the feeling is also part of this. It's all stored in this field. Everything is, your entire life is stored in this field, right? It's not all in you. You're just bioelectrical, a magnet, right? You're a magnet. You're housing the electrons, right? You're essentially the laptop. This is the cloud. This is the real cloud, okay? The real cloud. Maybe I'll title this The Real Cloud instead. But the real cloud is where all the answers are. And your intuition, the feeling you get, you're picking up on some of these answers. to the questions you have in your mind, because you may not be coming out and asking a question saying, oh, this is my question. I have a hard question. How do I X, Y, and Z? And you're like, well, the answer never comes to me. Well, okay, you're asking a very specific question, fine. It will come to you eventually, but it may come to you in waves or in pieces and parts, right? So it just depends. And it may build on itself. A lot of this that we're talking about now, some of this stuff that I've kind of wove into this, weaved into this, is years of me receiving different things, okay? And then there's facts, there's intuition, there's all kinds of things poured into this, right? Into this theory. And this theory is that this field holds all the answers, right? Your intuition is picking up on what? Timelines or choices, right? Possibilities. And then you have to validate your intuition, but the answers are coming to you from this field, right? So, all right, folks. Well, just a short little topic today. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. We'll find that when we do this, not only are we helping to transform culture, right? We're also adding to the field. What do you think that means? That means that as we add to the field, what? Gives back to others. This is why many people have the same ideas, right? Somebody on this side of the planet has, oh my gosh, I had this novel idea. And then at the very same time on the other side of the planet, right? Because there's so many of us and we're all spread out, some kid in some little country somewhere has the same idea and can't understand why I just had this idea. It's a novel idea. Nobody would ever expect them to have this idea. Oh my gosh, this kid is brilliant. He may be brilliant enough to realize that it's coming from this field, okay? And this field's trying to what? Shape our existence. That's a deeper question. You can ask that question if you want. Why? That's a fun why. All right, folks. Again, hit those good green dominoes. And naturally, all of this helps to transform not only culture, but we're transforming ourselves. And that's fun. If you're not having fun transforming and growing and just playing in all this neat stuff in this exciting time in our history, if you're missing out, if you're getting caught up in too much of the drudgery of life. Break out of that. Start to ask and field some questions. If it's problem solving and trying to get out of some muck and mire, great, use it for that. But then as you get through some of those things and you get better at it, you'll start to what? You'll start to get more feedback and grow even more so from this field, okay? All right, folks, have a great day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.